bigger table. We need a bigger table. Everything that we've been talking about in the lectionary, all of the scripture and all of the lessons are about Jesus talking about bread, the manna from heaven, right? This is what we've been talking about throughout the whole, the last few weeks. Like, we just can't get away from it. Like, every story is the same story. It's the feeding of the 5,000, or it's the people that get fed, and it's the people who want more bread. Give us this bread of life. And Jesus is constantly talking about the bread. He's constantly talking about manna from heaven, and this is happening. So, as we go into John 6 again this morning, let's kind of read through. This is where we ended last week, and this is where it picks up this week. And Jesus declared, everybody say this with me, I am the bread of life. Say that again. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Stop grumbling among yourselves, Jesus answered. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up the last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. No one has seen the Father except the one who's from God. Only he has seen the Father. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna, which manna means, do you know what it means?
What is it?
What is it? That's just what it means. It means, what is this? What is it? What is this? What? How? And that's, I think, how God works in our lives, right? I think a lot of times when we're in that moment of, what is this? Oh, that might be God. Anytime that you're like, what is this? What are we even doing? What is happening? Oh wait, that might be God. That's manna from heaven. That is, what is it? What is it? It's God. And yet, they died. I love Jesus. He's so great. Your ancestors, see, they were all like excited about their ancestors, and then Moses met them right in manna, and they're like, they ate manna, but they died. Thanks, Jesus. This is a great motivational speech. Please tell us more. But, oh good, he's got a but. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven. See, this is what I love. He said, you thought that was bread from heaven. This is really what we're talking about. And he says, this is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. Which anyone may eat and not die. Which, say it with me, anyone may eat and not die. It kind of throws me back to Ezekiel where it says, every kind of bird may eat. Anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. In another translation it says, the bread, my life, the bread that I am, gives life to the whole world. I love that. Isn't that awesome? That Jesus makes himself the point. And then he says, you thought it was manna from heaven. Yes, I am that manna from heaven. I am the real bread. They ate that bread and died. You eat this bread and you live forever. I'm the bread of life. I am the bread that gives life to the whole world. Anyone can eat. Anyone can eat. Anyone can eat. Are you with me? So I love this because what's happening here is constantly Jesus is going after, in everything that happens, he's making himself the point. Going after that everything that was said in the prophets and in the law, and it is all about me. The manna from heaven was picturing the Messiah, the manna, the true bread from heaven. Right? So this is what I think that when we there's a couple of things that I think that needs to happen. Number one, we need to recognize that this bread is the bread of life. Let me see if I can say this. Okay. There are lots of people who think, well, I don't know about God. I don't really trust God. I don't really know if I believe in God. Are you living? Yes. Then given the bread of life for you. The bread of life is the life that holds the whole world together and makes the whole world come alive. The bread of life is already in you. Whether or not you know that or not is another issue. I think that coming awake to that and being aware of that is a beautiful thing. I think some people aren't aware of that. They're not aware that the bread of life has already breathed life into them. But the point is that Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. It gives life to the whole world. Anyone can eat. I think what he's saying is anyone can come awake to this at any moment in their life. And I think that what we need to recognize is that the bread of life is the thing that has sustained us, and that we are also called to be those who open our table to anyone who wants to come and eat. So I think simplicity should be and can be, and I think must be, a place that has an open table. That says anyone can come and eat every kind of bird. In fact, when Jesus came to earth and lived his life, food was a huge deal to him. Eating a meal with you was a big deal to him. In fact, there's all kinds of places in Scripture where they get frustrated with Jesus for the way that he handled meals. And we're going to go through. I want to go through a few of them real fast. Let's just go through. So here we see. First of all, where are my notes? Oh yeah, I wrote them over here. That's really good. All right, here we go. So in Matthew 9, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, he was a tax collector. Many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they asked, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" So he's eating with sinners and tax collectors. Next one. In Luke 7, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. So he eats with tax collectors. We're getting that down. He's eating with tax collectors and sinners. That must have been a big deal back then, right? Okay? That was not a good way to enter into the world. You don't eat with tax, especially if you're a rabbi, you don't eat with tax collectors and sinners. And not only that, he ate so much that they're like, this guy's a glutton and a drunkard. Jude's like, what's that? Well, a glutton is someone who eats way too much, right? Who has no control. And a drunkard is someone who gets drunk a lot. I don't know. All I'm saying is that's what they said about Jesus. That's what they said. They said the guy's a glutton and a drunkard. And he eats with tax collectors and sinners. And I don't know which one's worse. The glutton, the drunkard, eating with tax collectors or sinners. But you combine them all, we shouldn't be following the guy. Right? So, not only that, let's go on. In Luke 7 it says, when one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. Well, I thought he ate with tax collectors and sinners, not these hoity-toity Pharisees. Well, but Jesus eats with anybody. So the Pharisees are mad that he eats with the tax collectors. Tax collectors were upset that he's eating with the Pharisees. Right? And then a woman in town who lived as a sinful life, she learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at the feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. So he's eating with all kinds of people. He's eating with tax collectors, sinners. He's called a drunkard and a glutton. He's eating with Pharisees and leaders of the law. And then there's some crazy woman that shows up. So go on to the next one. When the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who's touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Alright, let's go on. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table, the home of Simon the leper. So now he's eating with lepers. And by the way, that wasn't like, well, you sure that's what a good pastor does? They go to the hospital and they visit sick people. Well, no, not back then. Rabbis aren't allowed to touch unclean things. You don't sit down and eat with drunkards, tax collectors, and Pharisees, and sinful women, and lepers. You are off off the rails, Jesus. This is not working. Okay, let's move on. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house, reclined at the table. A woman that had lived in a simple life, she came, and she had an alabaster jar of perfume. That was the other. So what I want you to see in this is that not only was he eating with the Pharisees, the leaders of the law, right? But he's also allowing for women to come into a man's dinner. This is just a woman, by the way, this is just a woman in the town that lived a sinful life. This is not like one of the wives of one of the Pharisees. This is just some woman that found out that Jesus was there. And not only is she some woman who you can't just walk into someone else's house if you're a woman in those days, but she is a woman who's living a sinful life. Whatever that means. That the whole town knew that she was a woman of ill repute. Let's say it that way, right? She did not have a good reputation. And she shows up and makes a scene. And Jesus, I love this. This is the picture of Jesus reclining at the table. And back then they sat on the floor. So he's reclining. And so his feet are kind of out one area and his head's down, probably at a pillow or something down here. And this woman comes in and they're all looking and they're probably all like, and she shows up and she's like, and she's wetting his feet with tears, pouring oil on them and wiping it with her hair. Basically in a show of saying, I'm so sorry for the life I've lived. My life is falling apart. It's dust. It's dust. And I've heard about you, and I just want to be close to you, and I just want to touch you, even if I can just clean your feet. And Jesus, it's kind of this weird scene where Jesus just kind of lets her do it. And he doesn't kind of really say anything, so she's down there, woo! And he's like, the kingdom of God is like, and they're like, do you not see this weird lady doing this thing to your feet? And it makes people uncomfortable. Are you with me? It makes them uncomfortable. The Pharisees are uncomfortable with him. The tax collectors are uncomfortable with him. The leper is uncomfortable with him. Because it's all these weird, it doesn't make sense that just anyone can eat with Jesus. Go on. Jesus entered Jericho, was passing through. And a man was there named Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector. Well, now Jesus is up in the ante. He was wealthy because he took a bunch of money from these people. All right? He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. No one went to Sunday school? No? Was it just me? Yeah. How's it go?
Second March grade.
To see you. Yeah, you know what? Hey, Zacchaeus was short, but who was the shortest man in the Bible? Does anyone know? Nehemiah. Okay, so. I'm sorry. So Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus, so he climbs up in this tree to see him. And so he ran ahead and climbed the sycamore fig tree to see him since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached that spot, he looked up and said, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I'm going to stay in your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and they began to get on Twitter and say, he has gone to be a guest of a sinner. That's, they're just subtweeting Jesus every day. They're like, now he's eating with a leper. Now he's eating with a tax collector. Now he's eating, that's what they're out of their minds. They can't believe that Jesus would eat with anyone. Every kind of bird he's hanging out with. What's next? Is there anything next? Oh, yeah, this is good. I got a couple more. Now, Cephas, who is also Peter. Peter, the Apostle Peter, right? So his name was also Cephas, so just know that as we go through this. So Cephas came to Antioch, and this is Paul writing, by the way, and Paul says, I opposed him to his face. Paul opposed Peter to his face because Peter stand condemned. Condemned why? For before certain men came from James, James was the leader of the church in Jerusalem. James also being the brother of Jesus. So he says, I condemned him to his face because before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. Barnabas being the encourager of the brethren. So the actual encourager of the brethren, the encourager, the one who accepted Paul at the beginning, became a discourager of people because there was a certain faction of people who said, you don't eat with Gentiles. The problem with that is Jesus. Jesus ate with all kinds of people, anyone, every kind of bird, sinners, tax collectors, lepers, women of ill repute, Pharisees, Sadducees, everyone. Everyone was welcome at the table with Jesus. And so Peter is at first, he's eating with some people. He's doing the thing that Jesus would do. But then he pulls back because he's like, no, I don't want them to think that the way that they live is okay. Because if they get to come to church and you don't tell them in truth the love in truth, but you got to tell them. You have to tell them. You can't just eat with anyone and let them think that their life is okay. I mean, who would do that? Jesus. Jesus would eat with you. Jesus would love you. Jesus would accept you. See, our table's got to be bigger if we're going to be Jesus people. This is what's so amazing about the Peter story. Jesus said to Peter, he says, then the voice told, get up, Peter, kill and eat. This is a vision that Peter was having. This is before what we just talked about that Paul was talking about. Before that, Peter had a vision early on in the life of the church. And God had given us a vision that there was all these kinds of different birds and animals and stuff, and they were laid out and they were dead, or they weren't dead, but they were there. And God says to him, get up, kill, and eat. And Peter said, absolutely not, Lord. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean. And what does God say? Do not call anything impure that I have made clean. And if you go back to the verse before this, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned, because at a certain time before James he used to eat with Gentiles, but then he stopped. Why would he eat with Gentiles before? Because God said, don't call unclean what I've called clean. But then the pressure came, and we start to feel like, well, I've got to fight for God and the way that God is, and I got no. The way that lives are changed is when we open the table, we give the meal of Jesus, and we say, anyone can come and eat. The most loving you've ever been. The most loving thing you've ever done for anyone. The most, at your apex of love, God comes in and says, you need a bigger table. At the most affirming and accepting you've ever been, God says, you need a bigger table. At the most forgiving you've ever been, the most forgiving you could even reach to the depths of your life, the most forgiving you've ever been, Jesus shows up and says, you need a bigger table. I think if Jesus walked in here today and he looked at us and he said, simplicity, you're doing well. You're doing well. You're doing the stuff. You're loving and you're accepting and you're affirming and you're forgiving and you're merciful and you're not judgmental, but you need a bigger table. See, because here's the deal. No matter how loving we get, we're never as loving as God. No matter how forgiving we get, we're never as forgiving as God. No matter how accepting we are, we're never going to out-accept God. Are you with me? We always could add another chair to the table. We could always enlarge the table. We could always make the table bigger. Because I promise you, for some of us, there's limits. There's limits to where we will go. There's limits to what we will do. There's a limit for us somewhere. So we will find it. And at that limit, Jesus is standing there on the other side of that limit saying, you need a bigger table. Amen? So let's love. Let's accept. Let's affirm. Let's be merciful. Let's not be judgmental. Let's go after the world. And at that end, let's go further. And have a larger table. Stand with me.